What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Pro vs. Pro. Listen, I know this is a bit of a weird time for the PGA Tour. It's not the most exciting time, but this is going to be a fun show. We're talking one of the craziest cheating scandals we've ever heard of on PGA Tour Canada in the last few weeks, and tell a bunch of stories of our own experiences with guys trying to cheat, things of that nature. So this is going to be a fun one. If you're just here for the course fit discussion, for the bets that we've got, can skip ahead to the end, but I promise you, you're going to enjoy this first part. Justin, how excited are you to talk about? Like, this is some crazy, crazy stuff.
Well, I think the interesting perspective, I know there's other shows that have talked about it and touched on it, and, we're not breaking any news, but we get an interesting perspective. I obviously played PGA Tour Canada full time, so I know how things, work day to day there. And then, just the player side of this, right? What do you do as a player in this situation when cards are signed wrong and they're just the unusual circumstance of it all.
Yeah. So for those who don't know the story, you can Google this very quickly and get all of the details. The Spark Notes version is a guy double bogeys his last hole. I believe it was par 5. So he makes a 7. Signs the card for a 7, then asks the guy for the card back, erases the 7, puts a 5, and resubmits later that night. The guy who submitted the card, the scorekeeper, then calls in like, wait a minute, this guy didn't make a 5 in the last hole. He made a 7. The guy gets disqualified and then owns up to it on Twitter. A lot of people gave him a lot of credit for owning up to it on Twitter. What other choice did he have? Right. So that's a bit of a discussion in and of itself. But yeah, absolutely wild story.
Yeah, well, I mean, the two guys that he played with are just eating, and they're like, hey, he's not 3 under, he's 1 under. And they looked at his scorecard, and they're like, he made double on the last.
Yeah.
And they went over there, and it was clear, like they went all the way to pulling the card, and there was like clear as day 7 erased and a 5 put in. Like, putting them, like, I mean, but yeah. I'm still not sure what I think about the owning up to it. Like, you're right. People are like, oh, yeah, that's a good start, but how do you recover from this? I don't know. I know that where do I want to start with these stories? So there's a guy now that's either Corn Ferry Tour, maybe even played a few tour events. I'm not sure if I should name names or not. I don't know what benefit.
We should keep names out as best we can. But
so, yeah. So this one I won't name a name, but he's a South African, good player. Played at, I don't want to say a big school in Texas, but a good golf school. Was playing a European Tour event. Finished the round, signed the scorecard. His caddy went to him and said, hey, you shot one shot worse than what's shown on the board. Like, because the caddy's making a good chunk of change too, right? Yeah. I mean, so if you don't have any money, you're paying attention to what you're doing. The player says, don't worry about it. So the caddy's like, I don't know. And I don't know the caddy. I just know the player, and I know the story from some other people that know him. And I guess the caddy, like, after a couple nights was like, I can't do this, and called the tour. And they went back and talked about it, got the playing partners involved. And he had this. He literally had he had already had the check, so it might have been a week or 2 later. He had to literally rewrite the check back to the European Tour.
Wow.
And I think they kicked him off for a year, 18 months, like complete ban, lost all his status because what he had, he didn't have enough to retain. Obviously a great player. He reworked his way back onto the Corn Ferry Tour. And like I said, he may have played in tour events. It's not a household name, but I mean, a lot of people would know who he was. But that's probably the biggest story that I've ever heard of. Like, I couldn't imagine getting a phone call. First of all, a caddy being like, hey, I can't handle this, and the player having to send a check back when, you're fighting for your livelihood.
Yeah, and the caddy, like, good on him, because he was probably doing the exact same and still came forward with it. It's one of the weird things, because I would say at least 90% of the cheating is done in a way that you have plausible deniability. Like, you drop a ball when you lost one, it's in the woods, but you drop one. And unless someone goes into those woods and finds your ball, no one's going to have proof, or I think there with like fudging scores. I think more often than not, it would be someone finishes the hole, they just made bogey. The guy they're playing with asks them, "Hey, what'd you make there?" Instead of saying 6, you say 5, right? And so then, like later in the round, if they said, "Hey, I think you had a 6 there," people are going to go, "Oh yeah, you're right. Sorry about that."
Yeah.
When you erase a 7, make it a 5, and turn it in, 0% chance that number one, you have any chance of getting away with it, and number two, that you have any plausible deniability. So absolutely one of the craziest stories that I've ever heard. I can't believe that happened.
I mean, the plausible deniability, like you said, like that Q school deal that happened last year, like the guy ended up obviously being guilty, but man, he at least had a story, right? Hey, it went through right here and I got a great bounce and it ended up over here. I mean, those guys had
those who don't remember that story, that one equally insane. In fact, that one was probably more insane. Like this guy, the guy last year in Q school, like he went over a hill before his opponents and ran down the hill, put his ball in the hole, and claimed, "Oh, I holed out from 200 yards," when instead he was like in a bunker or something.
I mean, yeah, it was nuts.
Things of that nature. But yeah, like they were less sure that he was cheating, or at least they were almost. It was tougher for them to like prove that he had cheated, to make that decision to disqualify him, than this guy, because what this guy did was just so blatant and obvious.
Yeah, and I mean, so playing up there, spending a year up there, right? So if you're struggling a little bit, and from what I understand, this kid has been pretty good on PGA Tour Latin America. Like, he's not been a bad player. Like, he didn't seem like he was struggling. But you get, I missed 5 cuts in a row by 1 shot. I understand living on the cut line. And you watch the scoreboard over and over and over. So the other guys that are playing with you, if they're on the cut line as well, like, they're gonna watch.
Yeah.
This dude would have caused like 13 other guys to miss the cut if he would have not gotten so technically he withdrew.
Okay.
Is what the technicality is. But if he would not have done that, then it would have cost, like, it had moved the cut line to a different number, and it would cost like 13 guys to not have a chance to play the weekend. That's a big deal, man. Like, not for financially, like, if you finish a lot, you go around there and finish last, you're making $600. Like, that's nothing right there. But that $600 might mean whether you get into the Tour Championship, whether you keep your card for the next year. Because if you're playing PGA Tour Canada or Latin America, you're not playing for the money. You're playing for the opportunity to move up the ranking. And you do get some world ranking points and stuff like that for some of the events. But, when you think big picture as a pro, man, like, what if one of those guys went and shot a couple of 65s on the weekend and finished top 10? And all of a sudden, their whole outlook of the rest of the year just changed.
On the other hand, how great would it have been to be one of those 13 guys thinking, "Damn it, I'm going home this week, and also I got a call. Hey, somebody had to withdraw because he cheated. You're actually through the cut." Like, that's a great call to get.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, you're like, hey, I got another chance, and playing on borrowed money at that point, so you might as well go out and play good. But yeah, crazy story. Like, it's just the whole range of things that goes into it. Like, do you get caught on your first time? Like, he's like, "Oh, it's the first time I've ever made this mistake. I've never done anything like this." Well, you maybe have never done anything like this, but do you get caught cheating on your first time?
I'm not sure. I mean, I would think not, but at the same time, like, it's weird to think that somebody who has never cheated a little bit and gotten away with it could think that they could get away with this, right? So there's that element to it. But yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point there, because I would say most of the cheating actually goes unpunished. People get away with it far more often than they get caught doing it.
Well, I mean, yeah, like the USAM qualifier I played 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whatever. The 2 guys I played with shot 80-something in the first round. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest. They could have shot 62 the second round and said they shot 62, and I wouldn't have cared. Like, they were not getting through. Like, I didn't care what they were doing. I didn't look for their golf ball. Like, no offense, but, like, I'm around the lead, taking 2 spots. I got a chance. I'm already old and fat and tired and sweating. And, like, the last thing I need is more steps. So if I hit my ball down the fairway, I'm not going to go hunt their balls after they shot a couple 83s. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. It's just a fact of like, great story that we had this guy named Rhett that he was when I turned pro, he was probably late 30s, early 40s. And every time we went to US Open locals, he'd get on the first tee and say, boys, we're playing no hunt skis today. Don't hunt for my ball because I'm not hunting for yours. And he said it every year. I got to hear it one time.
That's awesome.
I was in the group behind him, but he said it every time. And like, I get it. He's like, if I hit it in the woods, like enough, I'm probably not going to have a chance to go through, but I'm not going to hit it there very often if I do hit it there at all. So why do I want to chase your balls when you're playing in this deal because you lost your fantasy football league and you're going to shoot 112? Yeah. You know, you're pretty, I'm sure you do this. You know your group before you go to a tee for a qualifier of what to expect and who you're playing with and that kind of deal. I mean, and every once in a while you'll get a good player that kind of flies under the radar, but you know what's going on before you go to the tee.
Yeah, like in a US Open local, I know like the 10 to 12 guys who are basically competing with for those 2-3 spots. So yeah, I completely agree there. I do think it's important to note. I would bet that there's more cheating on the mini tours than anywhere else in golf, maybe junior golf as well. But reason being, like, guys are playing for so much every time they tee up. They're playing for their livelihood. Maybe they're playing, and they feel the pressure of, I need to be able to tell my sponsor that I made the cut instead of that I missed the cut. It's not just like that you don't want to waste their money, but or that you don't want them to cut off their money, but you feel a responsibility to them, like they invested in you, so you need to be able to kind of live up to that and come through for them. So yeah, I do think that's an important point here because we do want to kind of humanize all these mistakes, but at the same time, some of these stories of cheaters just absolutely absurd.
So we were talking about it before, but I didn't think I had this many stories. But you know what? There was another guy that played Texas Tech, great player, got caught cheating in Abilene at a tight light story event way back when, and it was an awkward situation. I either had just quit or it was like kind of between when I wasn't playing full time, where I had taken off like a part time 2 or 3 years there in the middle. But they eventually had to ask him. It's a big deal if a mini tour gives you your money back and says don't play anymore. Like,
yes,
they can't prove anything. They still did whatever, or that there's a lot of deniability, like you were talking about. But I mean, if a mini tour that's trying to make money off of your entry fee says we don't want your money, there's probably an issue.
I think I know who you're talking about, and it's funny because I was about to say if it's the same guy, it's a guy who also was either caught or at least forced to give back a prize for winning a Pro-Am in Canada, because for 3 consecutive weeks he missed the cut by 4 strokes after winning the Pro-Am, and it was because they realized he wasn't winning the Pro-Am, he was just cheating his ass off in the Pro-Am, knowing that the members of the course, whoever he was playing with, just weren't going to call him on it, weren't paying enough attention to his score, so he'd make a 6 on a hole, write down 4, and at the end of the round, someone's going to sign his card, and he was getting away with it. And so I think the story was there was a hole, might have been the 10th, that was below the 12th. And so one of the guys on 12 in the 3rd week, standing on the green, was watching the guy play the 10th hole, knowing this guy has won under suspicious circumstances the last 2 weeks, watched the guy make a 6. Sure enough, he came in. There was a 4 on the card circled, and that's how they got him. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. And it's almost funny, if you're going to cheat, why are you doing it in a Pro-Am where the winning price is $300 cash or something?
Yeah, I was going to say, what was the most? $500 maybe? Yeah. I mean, all of our Pro-Ams we played a skins game. So there wasn't even a score. It was just a skin, a big skins game, which was perfect. Like a $750 skin spot. There was nothing better than winning a skin either. Why did that $375 mean so much more than the $1,800 you won for finishing 32nd? It just didn't make any sense. But there's a lot more stories than people, I think, than people know or tend to believe, or want to believe for that matter. I think junior golf, there's probably some cheating of when people don't know any better. They're not taught properly.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of give that a free pass. And then at that age, it comes down to parenting. Being a parent myself, like I know my kids, there's not much is not allowed, but that's one thing that like will be very highly disciplined. So it's just a different mentality. And there is a lot of guys on the mini tours that don't have anything. I mean, I lived in a car. You know, when you live in a car and you got a chance to make a cut or miss a cut by one shot, you know, if you've so-called found your ball, and a lot of times it's the same ball you're playing with the wrong markings, and you're like, oh, look, this could be mine, wide open shot, probably at least a one-shot swing, maybe a two-shot swing. I'm just going to say it's mine and play it, and you see that all the time. And once again, though, you can deny any wrongdoing in that circumstance. Whereas this deal in Canada, there's no hiding from it.
The other really popular one is, I think a lot of our listeners might remember the instance at Sawgrass a few years ago where Daniel Berger was advocating for a drop up near the green. And it was Hovland, of all people, Victor Hovland, the nicest guy in the world, smiling 99% of the time, who was like, I just got to be honest with you, man. I didn't see it like that. Basic, which translated to, you jackass, there's no chance your ball crossed up here. Drop way the hell back there.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's saying it delicately. And I think that's probably the most common one, where it's not even that like there's plausible deniability that if you get caught, you can kind of, you know, argue your way out of it, but where there's no way for anyone to definitively say this is a bad drop. You know that this is in bad faith, but there's also like an element of, for those who are trying to get that bad drop, they know that like the guys they're playing with are going to be a little bit hesitant to just call them on it in the moment. Becomes a thing. It takes everyone out of their rhythms. It's a really, really horrible thing to do. But I think that might be the one that people do most often.
Agree 100%. And the bottom line is it comes down to the player. Yeah. Like if you and I get in an argument and you say it crossed back there and I say it crossed up there, if I want to stand by my word and not meet in the middle anywhere, like the other player can't win that argument because it comes down to the person that hits a golf ball.
Yeah.
Now you're going to, let's be honest, you're going to be in the locker room being like, I don't know what his problem is, but he cheated. Like, you know, there's no doubt about it. Like, and you know, if you're going to call somebody out like that, you're obviously going to be 100% sure. You're not just doing it just for fun.
Right. Right. And I think that like, if there's a reason above all else why guys don't cheat, it's because collectively everyone kind of holds each other accountable, where nobody wants to be the guy that everyone talks about as the cheater. And, you know, I think pretty much everyone who has played on the mini tours knows, you know, oh, that's the guy that everyone says cheats all the time. I really hope I don't get paired with him. No one wants to be that guy.
Yeah. And you're right. It doesn't take long for the reputation to go around of like, hey, this dude cheats, and there's no doubt about it. Man, these stories keep popping back up in my head as I reminisce about all the nonsense that we endure playing mini tour golf. We had one where the guy, a competitor, this is probably the craziest one that I've ever seen, where the competitor called him out for teeing up in front of the tee box on a par 3. So, and
that one's almost always just an honest mistake.
Yeah, and the guy, like, you could see the guy's tee, where his divot was. Was it close to the front of the tee box? Yes, but you got to have some big balls to call this dude out on this, right? Like, it's literally meaningless.
Yeah.
And it's right on the edge, and he calls it out, and they are yelling at each other. And, like, official comes out. They're, like, I mean, the whole holdup of just, like, yelling. And I was like, man, this is crazy. And the guy's like, what do I do? Do I have to hit another shot? And they ended up saying he didn't have to hit another shot. They carried on. But can you imagine, like, I think they still had like 12 holes to play. How tense was the rest of that round?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's why people are really hesitant to call people out, like when they go for a bad drop, because you don't want that tension the rest of the round. You'd rather just say, I'll just let them get away with this and, you know, get on with my own round so I can focus on my own game and not have to do that the rest of the round. Yeah, it's kind of dicey.
So I've got two of the other ones. So one, Ben Poland, I don't know if you remember that name. So he was in Canada when I was up there. Really good club pro from up your way somewhere in the Northeast. We're on a par 3 one time. I was paired with Taylor Moore, and it's like a 4-group backup. And all of a sudden, like, he comes back to the green. He's like 3 or 4 groups in front of us, and we don't know what's going on. And you see him like walk over, and like this other guy pulls a coin out of his pocket and like hands it to the official and Ben. And Ben had forgot to finish, so he had like a 2-footer that he had marked to get out of the way, and went and picked up the flag, and he just got to talking. And it was in Calgary. He's in the leaderboard. I wish we could get a story from him. He'd love it. Like, he's like, he got to the next tee, and I guess the next green, and he always uses the same marker. And he's like, I don't have my marker. And it just like hit him. And so he didn't, it's the opposite of cheating, right? He didn't go get another marker and say it fell out of his pocket. He's like, guys, I think I forgot to finish. And like, sure enough.
That's crazy. I've had the panic all the time of like, I marked my ball. Maybe I'm 50 feet from the hole or something, go around, go to read the putt, can't find my mark, go back. I'm in the wrong area, but I think, oh my God, did I forget to put a mark actually down? And I'm just like, I don't even know where my ball was. And then you end up finding it. Thank goodness. But yeah, I've had that a lot, but never the forgetting to finish. That's wild.
Yeah. And then to your point about your mark missing, I was like second out on a Saturday, like early morning, barely made the cut, was in Abilene. I don't know why I remember all this. Like third hole is a par 5, and I bury the first 2, and I knock it on in 2 in the par 5, and I'm like, low score, like get back in the hunt. I got like a 2-footer, move my mark out of the way, and the guy I'm playing with is like, hey, can you tap that down? So I walk over there and tap it down. Don't think anything of it. Walk off. He putts, taps in. I go back over there, like, my mark's not here. And I was like, where's my mark? And he's like, I have no idea. He's like, I watched the whole thing. There was dew on the ground, and it had stuck to the bottom of my putter. And so I'd walked this whole time. I turned my putter over, and I've got my penny is stuck to the bottom of my putter. And I was like, I have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
And with the guy I was playing with, like, I don't know what to do. So we had to wait for an official. And it turns out I put it back and then moved it back and then tapped in. It wasn't a big deal because he had asked me to move my mark. If I had done it on my own, then it would have been a penalty. But since I didn't do it on my own, it wasn't.
Yeah, I remember in a tournament, man, probably my last year as an amateur was a match play championship, and the guy I was playing against had marked his ball, and there was like a little string, like it had fallen out of his pocket or something under his mark. So he pulled that out, and when he pulled it, his mark like flipped up into the air, and he was fine. Like, he thought it might be a penalty. He thought it might be a loss of hole, and because he was in the process of just marking his ball correctly, it was fine, no penalty. But yeah, it's so much crazy shit happens over the years. It's nuts.
Yeah. So I got one more good story that the opposite of cheating. There's a guy named Jackson Brigman, one of the best mini tour players ever. He Mondayed for the Nelson. So most people know him as the story of the guy that shot 66 the final round of Q School, back when you could go straight to the tour through Q School, signed for 67, missed his tour card by 1. Never got full status on the PGA Tour. He would have had full status on the PGA Tour, never got it back.
That's
yeah, like the worst thing that could ever happen, right? I mean, you just had a life-changing week, and now you played 6 rounds, you got in, you think you're getting your PGA Tour card. You know, he still went to what was the web.com. I think he beat it around for a while, top 10 to the Nelson one year after Monday, and didn't hit it very far, but one of the best putters ever. So we were playing in Oklahoma, 35-mile-an-hour winds, hard golf course. He shoots like 19 under and wins by like 14 shots. Yeah. He was putting with that never compromise square. Remember, the little training aid? It's like, yeah. That's what he putted with in 35 miles an hour wind, and won by 15 shots. And I was like, how in the – he's like, well, it just made me focus, and so I used it in the tournament. And it's literally a square on the end of a shaft.
That's nuts.
So, yeah, I mean, that's one of the best stories. Like, once again, opposite of cheating, like signs for a terrible rule, especially in today's day. We have all the technology in the world on the PGA Tour.
Right.
Why are you even like?
So for those who don't know, when you sign your scorecard, you are only responsible for the individual scores on each hole. So like you could write down 32 if you shot 36 and all of the holes are correct, doesn't matter. You're not responsible for adding it up. So if you write down a score that's higher than what you actually scored, you don't get DQ'd like you would if it was a lower score. You just get the higher score. So even if you made a 4, if you wrote down a 5, you end up getting the 5. So that's how this guy screwed himself out of it. I've got a very similar story from college. In one of our tournaments, one of our guys made a 4 on one hole and a 5 on the next, signed for 5-4 instead. So he's looking at the number, sees it's correct, signs it. He gets DQ'd. We would have won by 5 with his score. So the next guy finishes. I think he bogeyed the last so that we would win by 1. And as he's signing the card, we're like, all right, Jason, just make sure that every single hole is correct. Like Jack just got DQ'd for this. Make sure every single one is correct. He makes the exact same mistake. We end up with only 4 scores. Instead of winning the tournament, we get last place because we didn't have enough qualifying scores. That drive back to campus, let me tell you, that was a quiet day.
That's terrible. To have 2 guys do the same thing. But that's exactly why, like, when I get done with the scorecard, I don't ever, if I'm keeping your score, I will never put a square, a circle. I don't shape, I don't shade. I write a number and I never add them up and do it. I just write the hole by hole and give it to you because that's, there a lot of times you'll see like a 3 circled where they made a 2 on a par 3. So they see the circle and count as a birdie, but it should be a 2. So I just like, I'm a big proponent of just write a number down. I don't want to see all these shapes and it doesn't matter.
I'll put the shapes on my own card, but I'm not going to do that for with you there. All right. Story time was a blast. Let's talk a little bit before we get into the course hit for this week at the 3M. Sounds like we both wanted to talk a little bit about JT Poston's decision on 18 to go for it instead of playing it safe and just making sure he got that second place check. What did you think of that decision?
I don't hate the decision of going for it there. It just came out low and hit the rock. And then I didn't like his decision after that. He could have just hit the next shot over the green without any problem. It just came out the first one just came out a little bit low, and it wasn't far from carrying. I mean, it could have got lucky just as easy. My biggest deal is that, I mean, I'm not sure that he still could have won. So I'm not like, that's my biggest deal. If you're chasing somebody too clear that's finished, or 3 clear that is in your group, like then I get it. But it's not like, I think he could have made eagle and still not won. So
Hodges had already laid up. So his miracle finish is making a 3, like getting it, let's say, back of the green or through the back and either chipping in or making a bomb for the 3. That's the miracle for him. But then he still would have needed Hodges to make a bogey, and Hodges had laid up perfectly. He had a backstop. Like there was almost no chance he wasn't making at least a 5. So I think that's a key point, that there really was no chance of a win at that point. But what I thought for Poston was he had the strokes in hand where he could hit that ball in the water, drop, and then make an easy 6 or whatever it would have been to still finish second, and just had a disaster around the green. So I thought it wasn't necessarily a bad decision. It was just, dude, you gotta actually then golf your ball through the rest of the hole instead of making that last final mistake.
Yeah, and that's my point. Like, sure, go for it, whatever, doesn't work out, but then use your head and get it in the house. Like, I don't think anybody's criticizing him for going for it. It's more critical of, like, what are you doing after that?
Well, there were people criticizing his mistake or criticizing his decision, which I think was just a bad critique, but there were quite a few people doing it. In fact, I think they questioned him on the broadcast, but I definitely saw a number of tweets afterwards from media people who.
I don't think people realize how much farther a win goes than a second place finish. It's beyond dollar amounts. It's what else it gets you.
It's not being super competitive, but I think the people who were really criticizing him probably didn't have much of a leg to stand on from where they were coming from.
Yeah, I agree. And So does he bounce back this week? I mean, this should be a good golf course for him.
Yeah, I think it should be, which is a really good segue for the course fit. I know you've had a ton of success here at the Wyndham in DFS, so I definitely want your thoughts as well. The course fit model is about as straightforward as we ever get. It's pretty much you have to be accurate off the tee. That's question one. And then question two is, are you good enough throughout the rest of your bag, irons, around the green play, and putting to take advantage of any accuracy that you do have off the tee? If you've got both of those, if you're accurate off the tee and the rest of your game is solid so that you can take advantage of the positions that you put yourself in, you're going to have success this week.
Yeah, I used a little bit of my knowledge to when I won the 200 single here 2 years ago, so 2021, and Alex Smalley got a sponsor exemption, and I knew it was his home course. I just played with him. I knew how good he was, and I knew he was super cheap, and I knew nobody really knew about him, right?
Yeah.
So I was able to really play him, and then I had like Siwoo, and it was the year they had like the 6-person playoff.
Okay.
And
was that with Adam Scott when he missed the short one?
Yeah. So and I had like 2 of the 6 guys in the playoff, but I didn't have the winner. Maybe Kisner won. I don't remember who won.
It's either Kisner or Horschel. Sometimes those 2 guys, like when you're thinking back, they're kind of the same guy. But yeah,
I think it was. Man, it's crazy that Kisner won 2 years ago. But yeah, I think it was Kisner that won. I think Lowry was in the playoff. And I don't remember which 2 I had, but Smalley birdied like 6 of his last 7 or something. He got like 3 in a row streak, shot up the leaderboard, and it got to the point where like Graham McDowell was in the playoff. Is that right? Maybe. And Snap hooked it off the tee.
I think so.
And I was like, there's only one guy that could make me not win the 200 single. And he first hole 18 playoff, quack hooks it in the tree, squares the tree right back out in the middle of the fairway, and then hits it to like 10 feet. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Here we go. And they teed off real early because they were expecting weather. So it was even earlier here.
Mm-hmm.
I remember telling my wife, I was like, we're going to have lots of mimosas if we win this thing. Because, I mean, that was my first like taste of any DFS real success.
Yeah.
And whatever happened, I ended up winning without the winner of the golf tournament. But I remember thinking like Alex Smalley was the key to me winning because he played awesome on Sunday and nobody knew about him. Super well owned. So do you want to guess who I started my lineup with this week?
I'm going to go with Smalley.
Smalley and Siwoo is where I started.
I love it. I have not gotten the model up yet, so I don't have any bets yet. But the reason I don't have it up yet is because we've added a new type of standard deviation estimate. So if you look around the industry, basically every single estimate of standard deviation or a player's volatility, is he somebody that you can count on every time he tees it up, or does he have this massive ceiling but comes with a big floor, the high risk, high reward guys? Almost every single measure of volatility is a round-to-round standard deviation estimate. We also now have an event-to-event standard deviation estimate. And you get some really cool examples, like Tony Finau, for example, who his round-to-round standard deviation is among the absolute lowest on tour, yet his event-to-event standard deviation is among the highest on tour. So you might ask, well, how the hell is this possible? How can someone be so consistent in one way and so volatile in another? And the answer is, first of all, there's probably some variance in that as well. And so he might regress in both categories where he becomes a little bit less consistent round to round and a little bit less volatile event to event. But more than that, it tells us that there's this real phenomenon for him where when he's playing well, he continues to play well. And when he struggles to find it, figure it out within that event. He may need a week of practice before he can start playing really well again. So this has some extreme implications for, number one, just win probabilities, right? Like the guys who are more likely to continue to play well when they start well, certainly going to be more likely to win an event. But even more than that, live betting implications, DFS showdown implications. So some really, really exciting stuff coming your way here at FTN. And we now have an event simulator in 2 ways, where we're number one, simulating all 4 rounds of the golf tournament, figuring out that way. And then also where we're just simulating the event as a whole. then blending those results together to get all of our win probability estimates, top 5, top 10, 20, 40, and made cut probabilities. It's really, really exciting time for FTN, even though this is kind of the dead zone of the season.
And I think a lot of like, just going back to the Finau example, like I think that he also is one of those guys that if the golf course fits him, he takes advantage. And if he doesn't, he still plays golf the same way and hopes that he just kind of works it out that week.
Mm-hmm. Which is a fascinating,
super aggressive and hopes it.
Yeah, this is actually one of the more fascinating concepts in golf to me, and it's one that I've tried to tackle and haven't yet figured out exactly how to do so. But when we think about variance, when we think about a player's standard deviation, regardless of which type of standard deviation you're talking about, there's certainly an element of randomness, right? It's, let's say his true estimate on a given day is 1.5 strokes gained. Well, if that's his true estimate, in any given round, he could gain 2.5. He could gain half a stroke. He could gain, 5 strokes or something. There's going to be natural randomness around whatever his true estimate is. But then there's also some variance that is what you just alluded to, that some players are going to be more sensitive to course fit than others. Finau is certainly one of them. I think Cameron Young is another guy who might be that way, where he's super long. He's not a good putter. Luke List certainly comes to mind in that way, where they're going to have some courses that fit them and that over time they're going to produce much better results on some courses than others. And we don't really have a way to bake that sensitivity to course fit into a player's standard deviation. So when somebody has a high event-to-event standard deviation, does that tell us that they're really volatile, or does that tell us that they're really sensitive to course fit? Don't necessarily have that answer at the moment. It's yet another thing that we're working on here at FTN, just trying to bring you the best models that we possibly can. And I can tell you, without a doubt, we are well ahead of the curve on almost all of this stuff. So, we certainly feel really good about our PGA models, and we're looking forward to doing the same type of analysis for football. There's a little bit of a plug to say, make sure you're with us for this football season, because we're going to have a blast there too.
And the Finau, Finau's one of those guys too. Like, he's not going to be as sensitive to the course fit if he's playing really good. He's got enough talent that the course doesn't. I would even say Cam Young's the same way. If he's playing really good, the golf course really doesn't matter, because they have the ability to have elite talent. They maybe just don't have it as often as, per se, a Rory or a Scheffler or a Rahm.
Yeah. Well, where I think Cam Young is really sensitive to the course fit is that he's so long and so dominant off the tee that if you have a course that takes that advantage away from him a little bit, even if he's on, the rest of his game is good enough at times that he can still contend, that he can still have a great finish. But it's going to be a lot more difficult for him to do that at that type of course than one where he's creating this massive advantage off the tee.
No, yeah, for sure. I'm just saying, he has the ability to hit a 7-iron in the leather as much as anybody in the field. Yeah. So if it comes down to that, like where he's just playing good, he can still do that. But
which gets to the point that you've made a bunch previously, which is like any of the best golfers in the world can spike and contend or win in any given week on any given course, which is why we tend to try and find the biggest edge in the value ranges where, there might only be a handful of guys who have a real chance of winning from, the 7,000s or the upper 6Ks or something like that in some weeks. So I think that kind of just works hand in hand with that argument of yours.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, just to talk a little bit about this week, your high volatility guys, like Sam Burns is super high volatility guy, and this could be a course where he could go out and dominate, or if he missed the cut, I wouldn't be surprised either way. Do you have any thoughts on him? I know you're usually like an event like this. I just hate the thing that I dislike about him is that he's basically the favorite this week or close to it. So I tend to like to play him more as an underdog than a favorite.
So one thing that I really like about the fact that you went right to Sam Burns is he was like my favorite example of the event-to-event standard deviation having some real significance, because you look at the year-to-year event standard deviation for someone like Scottie Scheffler, and year after year, he's consistently between, let's say, 1.1 and 1.4 strokes per event standard deviation. And then Sam Burns is consistently up at around 2.1 or 1.9, something like that. So when you look at that, And you see this massive difference, and that they're consistent year after year. So basically, event to event standard deviation is stable from one year to the next. You know this has to be really meaningful, really important, and that can certainly contribute to why Sam Burns has won as much as he has over the last few years. When his non-wins leave a lot to be desired, right? Like he's missing a lot of cuts for somebody who has won as much as he has, I should say. That event to event standard deviation certainly plays a big part in that. As far as this week is concerned, he definitely has the game to contend and win if he's accurate off the tee. And for a lot of this season, he has been better in that regard than he's been in the past. I don't know that. You know what? Let's do this. Let's bring up his last few rounds and talk specifically about his driving accuracy, because I think for him, everything this week is going to come down to what type of positions does he put himself in off the tee. He had a really great stretch accuracy-wise, like from the PGA Championship through the Memorial. Wasn't quite as accurate at the U.S. Open, then another really good one at the Genesis, and then was very inaccurate at the Open Championship. So he's been kind of hit or miss, but still I think overall trending in a better direction than he's been in past years with his accuracy off the tee. So I absolutely think he's got a chance this week. But ultimately, like his chance of contention is just going to be pretty high every single week relative to his baseline expected strokes gained because of this type of volatility, because he has the skill of knowing how to win.
For sure. And I think that, like, I don't think I would be much interested in his outright just because he's going to be one of the favorites. But if you can get him super low owned DFS wise over some of the guys around, makes a little bit more sense. Like I kind of pay attention to this place a little bit more, like you said earlier. There's really the only other guy that I've really I got a couple that I've got to circle around. We touched on Justin Thomas last week. Blazing finish, missed the cut by one or two, straight to the putting green. Like, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, that takes it takes a lot to have a really good finish, feel like you found it, and not be satisfied with finding it, even though you missed the cut, to go back to the putting green where you're at to go work on something. I mean, he's trying. There's no doubt. There's maximum effort.
I think the main point that I want to make in regards to JT this week is kind of a fun one, picking at narratives in golf. I know with certainty that one of the things that I'm going to see in our Discord, one of the things that I'm going to see on Twitter or, on other shows around the industry is, I really like JT this week. I know how badly he wants to do this. I think he's going to get it done. And it's just like, we've seen how hard he's working. His motivation, his desire to be better than he's been, it's never been a question. We know it's been there. If all that mattered was how motivated he was to turn this around, he would have done it by now. Golf is a really difficult game. Wanting to get it done doesn't have any effect on your actual ability to do it. Now, his willingness to put in the extra hours and the time to figure this out, yeah, that matters. But his motivation to play really well this week specifically, it just doesn't matter to me. So I think he's going to be over-owned for that reason. And like I said last week, like I need to see something in the numbers that makes me think he's more capable of turning around than anything I've seen so far. Last week, he was really bad around the greens again. This is 3 out of 4 weeks being not just bad around the greens, not just uncharacteristically bad, I should say, but genuinely bad for anyone on tour, let alone for somebody who at times has been the best short game player in the entire world. Also putted poorly again, and also lost strokes with his irons for the 4th straight event, 5th out of the last 6. I just don't see enough there. The only positive sign is that he gained strokes off the tee again. At times in his career, that's been an issue. But, man, like all his strengths are weaknesses right now. And it's not just one of them that he needs to turn around. It's 3 of them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I hope that his numbers come in low because I actually think he will play good this week. I think it's more of I think you got to think and hit good shots. And it's not just rip driver every hole, bombs away. Like there's going to be a lot more of hitting it in the fairway. And you're changing grass types. You're changing a lot of things that I think go back to Justin Thomas's kind of roots. I hope you're wrong about ownership percentage because I like him this week for the reason that I think that, as you know, you work really hard for a certain amount of time, and when you start to see progress, the progress gets better and better. And so I can imagine even just the finish of the quality shots and stuff that he hit, that it'll be good. So that's just opinion. Obviously, nobody really knows, but
if there's a player in the field that most resembles Webb Simpson or prime Webb Simpson's game, I think it might be Eric Cole. We know how much success Webb has had here. The big hang-up for Cole for me is that off the tee has been really bad, including his accuracy. He certainly isn't long off the tee, but also losing strokes with accuracy off the tee. The rest of his game is super solid. Where do you land on him this week?
So he was in my first build, just the way it all came together. I like him a lot. I think that if I have an extra $300, I'd much rather move up to Hadwin. I think Hadwin has a really good week. I know he missed a cut last week, but I think he made something ridiculous. 5 bogeys on par 5s or something. I mean, just some dumb number. He admitted, like, made bad decisions. I mean, he hit 15 of 18 greens one day. Like, this is more his style of golf course. I'm happy to throw out last week. So if I can get to Hadwin, I prefer being there. If you can't, I think where were we at? I think you talked about this at Colonial, or like because we were talking about just Eric Cole in general, and you're like, maybe he's just this good. Like maybe this is who he is. Like he just is this good of a player, and he's going to contend every week.
The thing with him is, like, if he was gaining strokes off the tee, not only does that mean he might be losing, let's say, half a stroke off the tee per round right now. Let's say he was gaining quarter of a stroke. That wouldn't just be the 3/4 of a stroke difference off the tee. It would also mean he's putting himself in position to take more advantage of how good his irons are, to take more advantage of what a great putter he is. If he was half a stroke better off the tee, he might be a full stroke better as an overall player. So he's definitely somebody that I'm keeping an eye on talent-wise in the long run. But this week specifically, I don't know that I'll get there just because how much of a premium there is on accuracy off the tee, which certainly seems to be one of his biggest weaknesses, if not his biggest. It's either the lack of distance or it's the lack of accuracy off the tee. One of those two is his biggest weakness. I think it might be accuracy, and that's just going to be so important this week.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of interesting spots that I kind of found as I looked down the pricing of guys right next to each other in pricing that had different skill sets. Yeah. Cam Davis and Denny McCarthy side by each, like 88 and 8,700. Like, what I would say Cam Davis is probably overall more talented, but this seems to be more of a place that Denny should play better. So, do you ever take any of that into account, or you just kind of roll with what your projections show, and that's kind of where you're – I mean –
Yeah, I definitely want to wait and see exactly what the model is saying about those guys, but it's a really interesting range because I agree. I think, Cam Davis is the most talented guy there. We also love his scoring. He's consistently near the top in the birdie rate over expectation numbers. There's that grouping, Cam Davis, McCarthy, and I'll also throw in Aaron Rai. As you said, I think both McCarthy and Rai are much better fits for this course. How much of an impact that's going to make, I think I'm just going to wait and see what the projections tell me, because there's a chance, certainly, that I think the course fit for both McCarthy and Rai will have them each projecting above Cam Davis. And so maybe it's a situation where, like, if Cam Davis is super low owned in showdowns specifically, I'll be interested there just because of the scoring. But otherwise, I think I might have to give the edge to the guys with better course fits.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of where I stand too. I think I would, unless just you get super low on Cam Davis, I think that I would probably pivot down there to either. And I like Aaron Rai as well. I think he's probably one of the more underrated guys on tour at this given second. Yeah,
he's consistently been high lately in the baseline strokes gain ratings too, and now we get to a course that really does fit his game. I have a feeling he's going to project quite well. I think that's going to do it for the show. The only other thing that I want to say actually is it is interesting as I read through the names on this list. There are a lot of guys who, at first thought, I would say, hey, they're going to project really well, like Sung Jae, for example, Russell Henley, but lately they haven't been anywhere near as accurate off the tee as we're used to seeing from them. So I'm not really sure how the model's going to react to those guys. It's going to be really interesting to see. I'll have the projections up probably within an hour, something like that. We're recording this. It's now 9:30 p.m. here Eastern. So those will be up shortly. By the time you're watching this, they will already be up. And then, of course, Outright's article comes out tomorrow, 8 under 8K, and Hot Takes out Wednesday for all of the DFS crowd. And we're going to talk, I'll talk some more in chat, a ton more actually in chat, about this new standard deviation estimate, the event-to-event numbers, and the implications of that in live betting, the showdown, all that good stuff. So really exciting week here for what otherwise might be a fairly boring event. But I'm curious, before we get out of here, what are your thoughts on the new FedEx Cup rules? Because my initial impression is it seems like we're getting a better field this week because they're being more selective this year.
Yeah, I think for sure. And you know, I love these type of events. I've said it, you know, for the last 4 or 5 weeks in a row. You know, I tend to have way more DFS success than donating at the British Open, which I did. Pure donation, which I, you know, kind of called going into, and luckily, you know, these are the kind of events that I like. I didn't do very well last week, but you know, it's okay. You can have a couple of those. I think the field's good. It's going to be fun. I think there's a lot of guys too. Like, I think we're going to see somebody, you know, break out. It's kind of been a long time coming that should win. And I think whoever wins this week will be a player next week as well because of the similarities in golf course.
Yeah, agree there. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It's been a really fun show. Hopefully you enjoyed all of those stories from our mini tour days. And if you haven't yet read the full details of the most recent PGA Tour Canada cheating scandal, go do so. It is the story. Thanks, everyone. We'll catch you next time.